Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'll be keeping on with this series. Today I'll be talking about extroverted thinking. In keeping with the spirit of extroverted thinking, I'll just jump right in. The dominant TE users. These people tend to be constantly in the process of tweaking their environment and processes and actions to make them objectively better, faster, easier, etc. They're also quite active in communicating with others, primarily through disseminating information, offering assistance, or even altering shared space, for better or for worse. So yeah, the TE user might buy a piece of office equipment or swap one out for a newer model. Usually this is for the better, but obviously people have different definitions of what's better and what's worse. So yeah, not everyone likes all the changes that a dominant TE user might make. So I feel like the dominant TE users are pretty easy to spot. Like they'll be very active. They're gonna constantly be tweaking things around, changing things, experimenting with things. It's just action, action, action. This is quite a contrast to the auxiliary TE users who, for them, it takes conscious effort to use known facts to optimize their environment and processes. They can use logical analysis as a tool, but typically only for ends congruent with their personal observations. That's once again their NI or SI, and their personal desires, FI. So while the stereotype has it that ISTJs and INTJs are super good at using their TE, I think it's worthwhile to recognize that unlike the dominant TE users are not constantly using their TE as a default mode of being, constantly changing things around based on logic or perceived logic, but rather they need a conscious effort to do it. They tend to be bouncing around between their observations and their desires, and they really need to set aside a time and put conscious energy to use their TE. So while the stereotype of both ISTJs and INTJs are that they're super effective at using TE, in my personal experience in real life, a lot of them struggle a bit. Dominant introverted perceivers are super introverted. It can take a long time for them to fit new knowledge within their internal perception and thus take a long time before they start getting into the TE action. Moving on to tertiary TE. So these people, they might not be the best at implementing logical findings, but they tend to value industriousness, efficiency, and the personal achievement of goals. They're actually very adept at applying logic to a variety of situations to accomplish what's important to them. Though what's more obvious externally to others is usually their sheer force of will, their creativity, and their personal desires rather than their adeptness at applying logic. So I find that these people in real life, they tend to have this air of perceiver ease, if you know what I mean. Like, they tend to flow through life quite easily, seeming to other people, but meanwhile, they are actually very aggressive in applying their TE. Despite all the flowery ESFP, ENFP stereotypes, it's actually quite rare for me to meet one that doesn't have their finances or career together. Okay, moving on to the inferior TE users. This is kind of infamous for bad stereotypes. But anyway, I find that these people can apply cold rationality in isolated situations or mental exercises. But they experience difficulty when it comes to translating this ability out into the external world, especially in situations that affect people and themselves and the world. This can sometimes create the feeling of incompetence or wasted potential. They may overcompensate with heightened competence in a few different procedures, perhaps procedures related to their work, for example. And they can even get annoyed at others who are less competent in this very narrow field. So I thought that I actually don't do this, but then I realized that whenever people type people wrong in MBTI, I get so annoyed, and there's no reason for me to get annoyed, but I think that's my inferior TE. So yes, I feel like they tend to become super competent at a few things, and these things are usually related to their FI values. And when other people are not good at it, it can cause some frustration if you don't really think it through. Okay, moving on to the interesting world of shadow functions. For fifth slot TE or dominant TI, I find that these people are aware of the external empirical evidence, but treats it as an afterthought that doesn't necessarily affect their internal logical model. So it can affect, but not necessarily. This can lead some people to see them as impractical and inflexible. They tend to disapprove of what they perceive as an attempt to try to change their mind, especially through listing blanket facts and blanket observations rather than presenting a more thorough and alternate internal logical model that's consistent within itself. Yeah, I find that these people are probably the most disapproving of TE, just like how dominant FI would be the least approving of FE. I find that a lot of TI dominants just think that TE users haven't thought things through and that it's quite rude of them to just try to foist their observations when they haven't linked those observations all together to something that makes sense altogether. Now, moving on to the sixth function, or auxiliary TI. So these people are also aware of the external empirical evidence, and they often use this information to their advantage, and this creates a bridge between their own personal logical model and what is perceived externally as having merit. So they can be quite adept at applying logic in the external world using a combination of other kind of functions, namely TI and FE in my personal opinion, but they definitely still tend to act according to their own internalized logic. So I think because of this bridge, because of their ability to translate their own internal logical model into something that has external merit, perhaps in an FE way, I think this leads other people to see them as fairly effective and flexible. Moving on to the seventh slot TE, or Tertiary Te. So for these people, it was kind of difficult. I think it's hard for me to see blind spot TE when I already have bad TE. Like, I don't think Alex can see my SE blind spot because her SE is also not good. But anyway, I thought long and hard about it, you guys, and this is what I noticed. So I think these people tend to not arrange their external environment in a way that's evidently sensible. Like, it might be sensible to themselves, but it doesn't look sensible to other people usually. And this may lead some people to see their behavior as ineffective or even incomprehensible. These people tend to also be slower at internalizing what they perceive to be an arbitrary external logical structure without any logical backbone or framework. For example, hierarchies and procedures in the workplace, and this may lead them to make mistakes in such environments when they're being forced to adapt to external logic. So I kind of relate to this, but I think when I make mistakes in trying to fit into external logic, I just try harder. Like, it's like a love or hate relationship. But these people, I think, just naturally see their own internal logic much more clearly than the external logic that they sometimes might not even see. So moving on to 8th slot TE, or Inferior Te. So I kind of believe that a good logical model tends to be symmetrical, so I definitely wanted to have this TE in 8 positions be like kind of a mirror to the FE in 8 positions, and for this one, it was kind of difficult. But then I thought a lot about the FE dominance I know, and finally I came up with this. So they tend to not notice the external logical structures, but they seem to make up for it through their very active use of external emotion, which often allows them to skillfully navigate a variety of situations, including formal situations. This leads some people to see them as effective and even capable. They don't tend to communicate directly through external logic, though they tend to emotionally adapt to individuals and society's logic. So basically, I think they use external emotion to fit into certain realms of external logic, such that the effect of them not having TE is not obvious at all. And plus, being an extrovert judging function, I think they just have a easier time blending in with the external environment in the first place. And it's the same for extroverted perceivers, as I've also mentioned. And furthermore, their TI tends to be more simplistic, so most of the external logic is not gonna conflict with that. And when it does conflict, it's a very black and white situation where it's like, oh my god, my 2 TI, I'm exaggerating, but like my 2 TI rules are being violated. What does all this mean? But since there's only like a couple of TI rules in the first place, most things are not going to conflict. So they're going to be more adept at adapting to the external logic. Okay, so that is all I have for you guys today. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you'd like to get typed by me, you can do that on my website, kind8.com. And also, if you would like to support this channel, please do. It's on Patreon. The link is here. Thanks so much to my current patrons who have stayed with me all this time, and I'll see you next time.